I have a Patreon that's really cool and offers even cooler perks for $2, $5, or $10 a month. Maybe even more if you're feeling generous. Links down in the description for all the info regarding that if you're beautiful and interested in supporting me monetarily. Normally I go for more creative means of giving this message, but the sooner I get through this, the sooner I can talk about Gunvolt 2, and I really want to talk about Gunvolt 2, so I keep talking about Patreon when I can just talk about Gunvolt 2. Okay, I'm done. Time for the actual video. Goodbye. Azure Striker Gunvolt was Inti Create's debut solo project that turned out to be a pretty great game. It started off a new world fairly well while establishing a unique spin on the traditional run and gun gameplay, clearly based off of the Mega Man titles by focusing more on tagging and zapping. With stylish visuals, a great soundtrack with a fair bit of variety, and incentivizing going for the highest possible score, Gunvolt really put Inti on the map if their work on various Mega Man titles didn't already. It's a bit rough around the edges, but man, I still love this game. Its fast-paced, snappy controls, on top of all the praise I brought up earlier, especially those in regard to the gameplay, make this such an endlessly replayable joyride that I pop in every now and then just for the hell of it. And it seems like I'm far from the only one who quickly became a Gunvolt fan after this game, because after a few years, it would be high time for a sequel. But this wouldn't just be any sequel, my friends. It couldn't just be the same song and dance as the last time. Oh, no, no, no. While Inti was dead set on showing their competence with a great game to open things up, greatness was something they just couldn't settle with, because they made it their mission to have Gunvolt 2 be something more, something beyond, something perfect? Enter Azure Striker Gunvolt 2, our topic for today, and one of my absolute favorite games. Top 5 material for sure, because damn do I love this game. At surface level, it may look like more of the same thing, but if you take even a slightly deeper look, you'll notice just how many improvements and little touches they made to brush up on an incredibly interesting gameplay style. And I can't wait to explain to you what they all are and how they work together to make my favorite 2D platformer. Oh man, where do I start? The controls, level design, boss battles, there's so much to— Oh. Yeah, I guess we should start with the story, huh? Like previously, there's a surprising amount of effort placed into the game's storytelling aspects, and despite me, not really caring all that much what the type of game Gunvolt 2 is trying to be, let me give credit where credit is due. As of the point this video is being made, I care more about this story than any other Gunvolt game released thus far, more than the first, and way more than Luminous Avenger X. I shouldn't be all that surprised though, because there's clearly a lot more effort put into it here than before simply based on how much more story there is at the start of the game. In the original, there was a single, fairly brief cutscene before thrusting you into the game, with the rest of the exposition being done through in-stage dialogue and the handful of scenes that would follow after the opening stage. But here we've got a couple of scenes before the opening, some scenes during the stage aside from the in-stage dialogue here already, more scenes in the second opening stage, and even more story to follow. There's a lot of dialogue before you even reach the stage selection, and I find this to be a bit of a double-edged sword. Now thankfully this doesn't stop me from replaying the game too much, as there are plenty of ways to replay the game stages as well as the entire thing outside of the story mode, meaning subsequent playthroughs don't have to amount to me spamming the start button in order to skip scenes I've already seen a billion times. But it is a bit frustrating if you're going for achievements or a higher score in a story mode file, so the, quite frankly, overbearing story can get a bit much. But like I said, I really do like the story this game is begging to tell. It's definitely got a lot more going on than before, what with Zonda making her return, Zonda being revealed to be a her at all, since her true form is a lolly girl, and Joel gets her power zapped and turns into a tiny little fairy. Copen gets a robotic assistant that turns out to be a robotic idol. What the fuck? Now, all of that being said, this stuff, as weird as it may all be, ended up getting me a lot more invested. The original game had a lot of weird story concepts, and it was all played kinda straight. But here, everything's exaggerated. Everything's heightened. It's weirder, more complicated, there are more characters, and the stakes are higher than they've ever been. Near the end of the game, I was legitimately at the end of my seat, and most of that can be derived by how much of a step up the cast is overall. GV, Joel, Copen, and Zonda make up our returning characters, and they're all even better than before. Not to say they're any deeper or more complex than before, they're all just so much more likable. We get to see more sides to GV thanks to the in-stage dialogue being better than before. Joel gets a lot more added to her list of personality traits beyond wholesome, even if, that was pretty effective on me, not gonna lie. Copen becomes much more fleshed out and likable due to the added screen time, and Zonda is an absolute queen. Talk about a step up from the last game's main antagonists. Zonda is way more interesting and has an incredibly higher presence than Nova or the other spoiler guy. guy. She's honestly one of my favorite villains in gaming. She stole the show every time she was on screen. And the new supporting cast is a big step forward. I'll take the likes of Meteil, Quinn, and Lola over the Quill Agency any day. With my earlier praise regarding the in-stage dialogue, it'd be fair to assume that there's an English dub now, but sadly that still isn't the case. And despite how much better the dialogue itself is, that ends up making things all the more frustrating. Because now I really wish I was able to experience the conversations as intended while playing. But Japanese ain't my first language, so I'd rather focus on the action than the yapping. It's never too late to patch in English voice acting, but yeah, that's about right. The option to turn these off entirely is still here, so in subsequent playthroughs, I just go with that, but I wish I didn't feel like I had to. Also, I'm a bit bummed that these still take up as much room as they do, especially given how this used to be a 3DS exclusive along with the original. There's gotta be a way to do this in its own little corner so I can still have this on without feeling like it takes up too much of the interface. But give it a few years, NT will come around eventually, somewhat. Another time, another time. Anyway, this is still overall a big step up narrative-wise, featuring a fantastic, if bittersweet ending. Even the way Gunvolt 2 presents its story is a step up from before, having more cutscene artwork to emphasize story beats and a fair bit of scenes use moves that you yourself can do in the game. I love it when games do this. It's a great way to take advantage of video games as a storytelling medium and a shortcut to immersing me into it all. Matter of fact, is it just me or does this game look a lot better than the original as a whole? Yes, it's in the same engine, so it's got nothing to do with any sort of technical leap, even if the game does push said engine a bit further than before, but I more so mean with a wider range of colors, more visually distinct locations, and the updated and new character designs to make up a better art style and direction. I liked how GV and Copen looked before, but their sleeker looks here, I much prefer these. Unfortunately, I find Joel's new look to be the only real downgrade because it kinda looks like they aged her down and I don't know, it puts a bit of a weird taste in my mouth, but what do you say we leave it at that? Everyone else, from the supporting characters to the villains though, mwah, magnifique. The 3DS version is the only one that runs in 30 frames per second, so that alone makes me recommend any other version to it on top of other quality of life improvements, with one of said improvements being HD visuals. There are a few things here or there that NC may have missed, but for the most part, these games have never looked better. But all of what I've said already, you know, it's all nice, but it's nothing compared to what the game becomes once you know, actually play the game, the many great things there are to discover when you pick up the controller. So let's put all the extra stuff aside and start talking about the great crap regarding the gameplay. Now, given that it's the exact same engine, GV controls exactly the same as he did before, meaning the same rules apply here. You jump, you tag, you zap, you preserve EP, you use a flash field, you die when you lose health, you like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell notifications. It's all the same. Only this time, there's a bit more GV will be able to do over the course of the game. There are some skills to be unlocked, with a new favorite of mine being Grand Strizer, a beefed up Lux caliber with damage being correlated to your kudos. Sign me the hell up. There are 2 new offensive skills on top of this one too, but these aren't unlocked through normal means, but rather are secrets to be found in 2 of GV stages, which is awesome and made for a really cool surprise when I stumbled upon them. I also love how they cost 0 SP, so they give GV a couple more combat options, and I really appreciate that. Beyond this though, the biggest alteration to how GV works, as far as I could tell, is that the amount of tags GV has isn't dependent on his weapon anymore, but based on a new type of equipment, clips. This is a change I actually really like, because now you can try different types of weapons and pick one based off of how it shoots differently from the rest, without being forced to alter your attacking capacity. It basically just paves the way for more customization and options for the player to tackle these levels in the ways they want, which is always appreciated. I know, options, what a concept. Yes, equipment is back and more or less functions the same, but on top of the new clips being a thing, Pervasion ends up being a perk for a lot more pieces of equipment than before, I found. Like last time, I wish this was a separate on and off switch or something, because I want to experiment with different builds, but I also don't want Pervasion. It's still as broken as before. Same for Reincarnation, it's still here and I still want to turn it off. I know a lot of people like these, but I don't. I can tolerate Pervasion, I suppose, because at this point, just losing my kudos hurts even more than taking damage, but I don't like Reincarnation at all. I know I can lower the chances of it happening by not talking to Joel as much, but the conversations are so good, and I love these characters. Ah, the dilemma. With GV's little tweaks on top of his already rock-solid foundation, improving the level design and going that much further with the boss battles truly ended up being the key to mastering the Gunvolt formula. Because while score attacking the first game stages proved to be tons and tons and tons of fun, Gunvolt's biggest weakness ended up being that playing the game in a casual sense just wasn't nearly as fun or engaging as replaying and attempting to master them. Gunvolt 2, however, being the shining piece of royalty it is, takes this complaint and kicks it out of the stratosphere. These levels are way more interesting to traverse. There are the occasional branching paths, level-specific gimmicks, and plenty of secrets as well. In fact, just the opening stage feels like it belonged among the best of the first game's levels. From there though, things just stay interesting, from the water geysers you need to avoid in the sewers, scaling a castle, so on and so forth. I mean, just look at the footage I'm showing you. Even if I weren't going try-hard on the levels, I'd still be having a lot of fun playing the game, and I know this would be the case because that's exactly how it went down in my first playthrough. And for the sake of this review, I made sure to record 2 separate playthroughs, one where I just casually play the game, and one where I go try hard and get the highest score. Both times, I was having a blast. And even all the way back at my first playthrough, as soon as I finished, I wanted to replay the game all over again to get better at it. So despite the more complex levels, that addictive gameplay loop and high incentive to master the game isn't lost. This is a straight up improvement, and a huge reason as to why this game works so much better than the last time. And the boss battles, I mean, damn! They're a lot more aggressive and have much tougher patterns than before, making for what I believe to be a way harder game than the first one. But I just love this game all the more for it. I love every single fight. I love how I can still do each and every one without taking damage if I'm good enough. And I love just how much more nuts they go with it all this time around. And guess what? No red guys, so they're all good bosses? What? These remain the highlight of the game, and I'm so glad to say that, even considering how much they improved the levels leading up to them. All this improvement and polish, it's all so impressive. Like, seriously, it's hard to really emphasize how good it all is just through this review. Play the game yourself and you'll really understand what I mean, especially if you replay it once or twice. But the moment I knew that they truly perfected it all, the moment I knew for a fact that this was my favorite 2D platformer, was when I had an epiphany. And turn off the game for a break, go back into my file, and realize, wait a minute, there's a whole other playable character! Copen. From one of the better bosses in the first game to a whole separate playable campaign. You've come a long way, dude. Now, multiple playable characters, especially those in platforming-centric games, tend to go one of 2 ways. On the one hand, they can prove to be an artificial means to pad out the game, introducing a completely different playstyle that doesn't quite fall in line with the design philosophy of the main character. Sure, there's variety, but it can border on playing a completely different game, and personally, I'm not a fan of whenever this misstep happens. But on the other hand, a new take on the main gameplay style, providing a breath of fresh air with a familiar feel, can just go to show how much the developers really understand the principles of the design. And can you take a wild guess which side Inti leaned on this time around? Copen is designed so well and so in line with the core of the Gunvolt experience that he acts as proof that this game wasn't just a step up, but a sign of mastery. But what is the core of the Gunvolt experience? What are the principles of its design? What's the real name of the game? To me anyway, Gunvolt is not only about tagging and zapping, but risk versus reward. You should have to tag your enemy in some way, shape, or form before dishing out the real damage, and always be thinking about whether or not it's worth attacking enemies to risk all of your score for that high kudos bonus. You tag to zap and risk for reward, the name of the Gunvolt game, or at least a big part of it, and something that should be thought of immediately when introducing a new character into the mix. And Copen doesn't just succeed at this, he soars. No, seriously, look at him go. Copen plays quite a bit differently, as his method of tagging enemies involves him dashing straight into them point blank, and shooting them afterwards. If you want the most score, you can't stop dashing, or more specifically, air dashing. He can boost into 6 different directions, so if you look at some of my pro gamer gameplay, you'll notice that I keep bouncing off the ground to keep the combo going. This all helps the already fast pace of the Gunvolt gameplay keep a new sense of momentum, while encouraging a reckless attitude compared to GV's more defensive moveset. With just as great movement as GV, new ways to approach similar challenges, and showcasing a true understanding of what makes Gunvolt, well, Gunvolt? Copen is a more than welcome addition that I absolutely adore. I can easily see many people preferring the way he plays to GV, but personally, I love them both about the same for different reasons. The ways you customize them also differ from GV quite a bit. Rather than equipment slots, Copen has a select number of skills he can synthesize at the shop and install on this board that will extend as you gain levels, or as you find more skill slots hidden in his stages. I actually prefer this to GV's equipment system, because even though you still have to synthesize and get materials through challenges or replaying stages, you can install and mix them in any way without being limited to the different equipment types. Also, this is the closest we've gotten to an on-off switch for Privation. Don't want it? just unequip it. There is a one for reincarnation though, so that kind of stinks, but we take what we can get. That being said, getting materials is still a bit of a hassle like last time, and I'll briefly bring up challenges later on, but like before, I don't mind it too much. You can still beat the game just fine with Copen and GV's base kits, with your equipment or skills being added extras to incentivize replaying stages. If you don't feel like grinding materials to synthesize cool stuff, then just don't do it. But if you do feel like going that extra mile, these are great rewards for doing just that. Again, I feel like this is how it should be, even if the materials you get for completing stages could stand to be less random. The other big difference between Copen and GV are the levels. Since Copen has a much larger movement range, the levels needed to be a bit more open to compensate, and this was all for the better. Every single one of his unique stages have multiple means to reach the goal, emphasizing this game's mission to create levels that are fun to play again and again, but also a joy to experience casually. On the ground, these are some of the most fun stages to platform in, but in the air, these levels become jungle gyms to showcase your understanding of their design and their relationship with Copen's unique movement options. Now, GV and Copen do share a fair amount of levels, but you'd be surprised how much better this works than it sounds. These are expertly designed to compensate for both GV and Copen's movements, and occasionally they'll alter level design to better fit the two, sometimes to the point where they can border on being two completely different levels. So even if they share some stages, I really don't mind. It's actually kind of refreshing to approach similar challenges in two completely different ways, especially when Copen gets to fight GV's bosses and vice versa. Yeah, Copen's main stages feature different bosses than GV, and guess what? They're just as good. Why is this game so amazing, man? What the hell? While you get different types of guns for GV after defeating a boss, Copen actually gets different boss weapons like Mega Man, whether that be ice blades, hair drills, etc. These are a lot of fun to play around with, especially since there isn't a finite amount of ammo to them. It's more like GV's EP, where you can't constantly spam it, but once the meter is low, you'll have to wait a bit before it recharges, so there's still some thought you need to put into preserving energy and having some to spare in order to get the most points in your air combos. With EX weapons, there are weaknesses for each boss, but these don't reset patterns or spark mandrill syndrome any of them. They're simply a means for dishing out more damage or getting more points. The only instance where I found that it was a bit ridiculous was with Tengen. I can kill this dude in like 3 hits with Copen. It's kind of insane. But that aside, this is exactly how it should be, and I feel like whether you use a boss weakness or not, you're still in for a hell of a fight and are expected to sharpen your skill and recognize boss patterns. This game has such a knack for showcasing a proper understanding of the running and gunning, the tagging and zapping, the risking and rewarding. The whole way through is such a solid ride from the opening stages to the final stretch. One complaint I've noticed is that some people find this game a bit too short, and I don't know why that's brought up here and not with the original, since there are literally more stages in this game. And besides, even if there were less stages, they're all so much better designed than the first games, and very replayable at that. I've come to learn that it's not necessarily about literal length, but rather a game's lasting power. There are tons of short games that I've compiled more time into than the lengthiest of titles because they give me more reasons to come back. I don't think replay value is the only lost art here, but shorter titles that feature more prominent, meaningful progress. Gunvolt 2 is the perfect length that I feel has enough substance, yet it's short enough to where I can reasonably play the game so many times. And even if it were longer, if it maintained the same quality it has as is, I'd still come back as much as I do, because where Gunvolt 1 established a fresh, innovative way to approach the 2D platformer, Gunvolt 2 perfects the formula. Where Gunvolt 1 spent a decent amount of time giving its story a proper foundation, Gunvolt 2 perfects the formula. Where Gunvolt 1 placed more of an emphasis on combat and score attacking, Gunvolt 2 perfects the formula. Where Gunvolt 1 had the 1 or 2 bosses that, while fairly engaging, did teeter a bit on the unfair side, Gunvolt 2 perfects the formula. The characters are better, the bosses are ridiculous but never unfair, and the levels encourage me to not just breeze through them, but approach them in new and exciting ways. This was the game that made me want to get good at Gunvolt, that made me want to keep replaying it over and over again. It even made me want to go back to the first game and sharpen my skill there with what I learned here. The skill ceiling is as high as you want it to be, and if the first game didn't teach you that, this game will. And if that's not something you want to do, this game will let you know how that's okay, and that you can still have a great time regardless. Gunvolt 1 established something new, something unique, but Gunvolt 2, say it with me, perfects the formula. And after so many playthroughs, constantly coming back to it and never tiring of it, always learning something new even all these playthroughs later, I realized that it's the game that keeps on giving the more I put into it, and is easily my favorite 2D platformer. Gunvolt 2 doesn't just perfect the formula, it just is. It just is perfect. Gunvolt 2 is the perfect 2D platformer. But okay, I see how some of you are looking at me. Calling anything perfect is hyperbolic no matter how you slice it. And referring to this game as such isn't even something I agree with. Challenges still suck. Thankfully, you don't have to equip them for the challenges in question to count, meaning you can do more than 3 in one go, but you still have to beat the stage for its challenges to be done in the first place. And it still has that whole scaling issue. I beat the stage with an S rank, but it only counted for the B rank or higher challenge, and now I have to do it again for it to count for the A rank or higher challenge, so on and so forth. This is still dumb. Why is it still like this? And getting the true ending while not requiring you to arbitrarily go against the way the game's designed and look for stupid gems is still kinda roundabout and unnecessary. You have to beat the final stage with GV, do it again with Copen, then you have to beat the stage again with GV to see his true ending, and with Copen again to see his. So I have to play the final level 4 freaking times in order to see how their stories properly conclude. What the hell? And did I mention that the final level's the boss rush? Make the true final level added to the level select or something. Especially because it's just the true final boss and not a full new stage or whatever. I feel like having a true ending of some kind in general has become forced. There's no need for this, just let me play the game straight through. I'm gonna play with both GV and Copen anyway, so this is padding. Honestly though, those are really my only big issues with the game. While material grinding can be annoying for some, I really don't mind because I replay these stages a ton anyway. And the different pieces of equipment are all extra. You replay these stages through score attack or the speedrun mode, you can't even synthesize, you can't even get materials. Who cares? In-stage dialogue not being translated in my language with a full dub is a bit frustrating, but whatever, man. I'm here for the gameplay, and if this stuff's too distracting, I can just turn it off. At the end of the day, when I refer to this game as the perfect 2D platformer, and really any game I refer to as quote-unquote perfect, I more so mean perfect in the ways that matter to me. What I came to Gunvolt for and what I took away from it were all excellent. This is a great game that got me to master the mechanics, care for the cast, and come back to in order to replay it again and again. Something I've done for 5 years now and will continue to for many, many more. If you liked the first game, you'll love this one. And if Gunvolt 1 didn't quite do it for you, I hope you'll give this one a chance and see if it clicks any more or less. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't like it as much as me, but there's something for a lot of you here, especially if you and I share similar values and takeaways in terms of what we look for in a banger game. Because to me anyway, Gunvolt 2 is the king of 2D gaming as a whole. Oh, and thanks for watching this video, giving me another excuse to replay the game. I was starting to run out of those. And of course, thank you to the homie Neo for another banger thumbnail. She's been killing it lately. Go commission her already. What are you waiting for? Links in the description. And if you have any more money to spare, perhaps join my Patreon. Not only do you get early access to videos like this, but you can get thanked at the end of my videos just like the super sexy $10 Mystic artist listed here. Special thanks to First Lieutenant Noguchi, Copen Arterlane, Kiara Loveday, Mecha Saltman, Neolab, Noah Ignis, and Steve Appleman. And of course, a big thank you to all of my beautiful bass and burst artists listed here as well. I've been remaking my Gunvolt reviews, so next will be Luminous Avenger X. Not necessarily next, but after 1 or 2 more reviews. I don't know, I'm just doing whatever I feel like, so go with the flow like me. I'm sure you'll like whatever I do. I think my videos are pretty okay. Regardless, so long as you stay hydrated, I'm sure I'll see you in whatever we do next.
She